Hello and welcome back to another video on my channel. So in this video I'm going to show you how we can create an application for facial detection. So we will be using the vision framework of Apple, and using that we will classify whether an image has faces in it or not. So let me just show you guys the app we will be building. So in this app there will be an image presented, and there is a next or a previous button, and down here we have a classify button. So what this classify button will do is it will detect the number of faces in the image, and it will give us the result down here in another text element. So as you can see, there are no faces here, so this will return 0. Okay, so this is how our app will be working. So let's get started. So as you can see, I have a basic SwiftUI application ready here. And this is just a basic setup where I have placed the buttons, the classify button, a text label at the bottom, and an image viewer here. So I will link this starter project in the video's description so you can download it and get started with it. Or if you want, you can just set up your own basic UI. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, we will import the vision framework. Now vision framework allows us to and if you scroll down towards the classify button, you can see that currently this button is empty. So here we can set up a function which will detect the faces from the images. So for that, let's create a new function, and I'll call this detect faces. And I'll just add a completion to its parameters, which will be an escaping completion. And this function is going to return an array of vn, which is the vision framework, face observations. So as you can see in its summary, that this is the type of an observation result from the vn face rectangle request. It contains the information about the facial landmarks and the regions which are found in the image. So basically this will detect the faces from the images that has been provided. And I'll just set this as an optional, and this function doesn't really return anything. Okay, so inside this function, the first thing we will need is the actual image. So I'll just set up a image variable which will take the UI image from our photos array. So I'll just take the current index selection from our photos array, and the next thing that we will need is the CG image. So a CG image is basically the core graphics version of an image. So let's create a new variable, and we'll call this CG image. And we can use the image file to get the CG image version of this. I'll just set this as a guardlet. And next we will need an orientation. So I'll just set up a new variable which is orientation, and we'll use the CG images property, and we'll use the CG images orientation property. And we'll just provide it with a UNT32 value of our images orientation. And we can get that raw value. And since this is a guardlet, we have to create an else block, and in the else block we'll just return the completion nil. So because this is an optional return, so we can simply return a completion nil. and we can add a comma here, and we can get rid of this. Okay, so next up we will create a request variable. So this will be the object of a VN detect face rectangle request class of the Vision framework. And next we'll just create a handler to use this request. And this will be a VN image request handler. And we'll provide it with the CG image file. And we can just leave the options parameter blank. And here I'll just add another parameter, which is orientation. And we'll pass our orientation variable here. Okay, so next up I'll just set up a dispatch queue global async, because we need this function to take place in the background thread. And inside this we can just add try handler and make it perform the VN face rectangles request that we just created. And next we'll just add a guardlet observations. So in this we'll just provide the value that our function will return after performing this request. So for that, let's just add request.results here. And these are results in the form of a VN face observation. And since this is a guardlet situation, I'll just add an else block here. And again, this function can return a completion nil if this observation variable doesn't have any values. Now in case it does have those values that we need, we'll just return the completion handler with the observations data. So our detect faces function has been set up. Let's just implement this function inside of our classify button. So we'll unwrap the completion handler here and set up the results variable, and inside the function we can just unwrap the results variable once, because as we mentioned here, the results variable is an optional variable. So I'll just unwrap the optional variable here. And inside of this if block, we'll just update our UI, which is basically a text element which appears down here. This will return the number of faces that it has detected in the image. So for that, let's create a state variable. And I'll call this classification label, which is a string. And so inside our classify button, we can just update the value of this classify label. And we'll just return the count of the results variable. Right. So down here in the text element, we can just display the classification label that we just created. So there are no errors and everything looks good. Let's just go ahead and run our application and see if this is working. So let's go ahead and try this out. So yeah, this has returned the correct value, which is 1. Similarly, here it should return a 0, and it's returning 2 faces here. And similarly, it returns a value of 6 here. So our app is working perfectly. You can go ahead and add more images into our assets folder and add them to this photos array, and you can try this out. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll create a part 2 of this video where we can not only count the number of faces that are present in our images, but we can also extract the exact facial features of those images. So make sure you subscribe for that. So make sure you subscribe to stay tuned for that. Thank you.